right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started with our panelists today. And so my name is Catherine Boyd. I am the Director of Professional Success at Samford University, and I help students find jobs and internships, and we've just been blessed by the WBL in many ways at Samford. We have one of the groups that meets every other Tuesday at the business school, and we also have been honored to have an intern work with the YBL and WBL this last summer, and so just lots of great connections there. So I wanted to reiterate that we are so grateful for your attendance today, just your support of the WBL. It's definitely meant a lot in my life, and hopefully if this is your first time at an event, you'll come to quickly realize how beneficial it can be in yours as well. And so before we begin, I just wanted to kind of mention that, but we're all here to hear from our panelists, so let's jump right in. And let me just start by saying that I'm honored to be sitting on the stage with these ladies, and I can't wait for you to hear their stories. So without further ado, our panelists today are Ashley McMakin, who is the owner and founder of Ashley Max, and Jennifer Hay, who is the CEO of Keller Williams Vestavia, which is the largest branch in Alabama. And so I think we're all interested. Yes, thank you so much. We can see y'all now. We are all interested in hearing a little more about your families. So if you'll take just a couple of minutes and introduce everyone to your family. Ashley, if you don't mind starting for us.
So am I on? Can y'all hear me? Okay. I was born and raised in Birmingham, went to Briarwood, graduated from there in '98, and born to wonderful parents, Ken and Sandy Deaton. And I have 3 brothers and grew up in a family that loves to cook and loves food. And in fact, people called us the Eatin' Deatons, all of our extended family and friends. And so that's kind of where my love for food came from. And then I met my husband at the University of Alabama, and we got married at the ripe old age of 23 when we barely knew each other or anything about life, really. And actually today is our 16th anniversary. So anyway, and then we have 4 children. All of them came to us very different ways, 2 through extensive fertility treatments, 1 through adoption from China, and Mally's here with me today. And then we currently have a foster son that joined us when he was 16. So
awesome. So my name is Jennifer Hay, and I am from Charlotte, North Carolina, born and raised, and then had the unique experience of living the next 20 years of my life after college in Anchorage, Alaska. I married a guy that I met in college and in Lynchburg, Virginia, and he was from Alaska, so that's how we ended up there. He and I were married for 10 years. In that time, I was blessed with 3 wonderful children, Brianna, CJ, and Mac. We divorced after 10 years, and I became a single parent in Alaska, so about 14 years there. Raising my kiddos on my own, and the Lord presented a great opportunity to move to Birmingham, where my family had migrated south. My father is Moses, otherwise known as Harry Reeder. He's the pastor of Briarwood Presbyterian. He and my mother moved here 20 years ago in September, actually. So, and then all of our family followed over the years. So I moved here, and lots of things happened, but I remarried about two and a half years ago to Philip Hay, whose father was the founding pastor of Covenant Presbyterian Church. So we had a PCA wedding, and so now I have 5 children. So my daughter is 26. She lives in Paris, France. So occasionally I have to go to Paris and take one for the team. She works in fashion design with a designer there. My son CJ is 23. He lives in Birmingham. He is a realtor with Keller Williams Vestavia as well. My youngest son Mac is 19, and he is taking his real estate exam Monday at 1:30. So if y'all could offer up some prayers, that'd be great. My stepdaughter Catherine Barrett is a sophomore at University of South Alabama. I never say it right. University of South Alabama, and she's a KD for all y'all sorority girls. And my youngest is a 16-year-old junior at Oak Mountain. It's hard to keep track. So that's me.
That's Awesome. Well, now that we know a little bit more about y'all, let's transition into talking a little bit about your careers. Neither of you set out in life to have the career that you have now. So Jen, if you don't mind starting this time, and if you'll just kind of tell us how you went from working at a daycare for 10 years to a successful career in real estate. And I hear it has something to do with a Christmas card that you received in the mail quite a few years ago.
Well, we'll use the adjective successful as loosely defined, but I appreciate the kind words. So when I got married 100 years ago in Anchorage, for some of you may know, Alaska has a very, very high cost of living. And so there was no one parent stay at home. It just economically didn't work. So we had made a commitment that I wanted to be with our kids. So I worked at my church at a daycare, which is fabulous. I was there for about 10 years, but I made about $10.50 an hour, which didn't go far, but I had free daycare. So any of you who've ever stroked a check for childcare, you know that benefit was wonderful. As the years progressed, it became very clear that my marriage was not going to make it. I read Stormy O'Martian's The Power of a Praying Wife, I think 797 times, and it didn't stick. I was going to need a way of escape. And I knew that my husband would not be financially supportive once that would happen. So I did the math, and the daycare job just wasn't going to cut it. And I was really struggling because at the same time, my kids were 7, 6, and 2, and I had become very accustomed to being with them all the time. We had 135 kids in the daycare. It wasn't like they were in my room, but I saw everything. I was there for everything. So I got a Christmas card one day, and this is back before Facebook. This would have been 2001, excuse me. And remember the Christmas letters? Like every family used to send out, this is what happened in our family over the last year, and you actually read that because you didn't know. Today, we know everything in real time, so it's a little different. But I got a letter from one of my college roommates, and she just dropped in that she had gotten her real estate license. And I thought, well, the things I'm looking for is the ability to provide for my children, the ability to be present as a mother and raise my children and honor that responsibility, which means flexibility. And so I thought, this sounds like something that maybe I could do. And that's what prompted that journey. Ironically, when I graduated from college, I had a degree in psychology with a minor in communications and counseling and public speaking, which is a useless degree if you don't have grad school, until I got into real estate. And if you've ever bought or sold a house, you understand what that means. So that's how I got into real estate.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And Ashley, tell us how you went from casually playing around with your mom's recipes in the kitchen to owning 4, is that right?
Yes.
4 amazing brick and mortar restaurants. As I understand it, Ashley Max, the business concept, was created during a really tough season of your life.
Yeah, so I was reading this morning that verse in Proverbs, a Lord plans in his heart, but the Lord directs his steps, man plans in his heart, the Lord directs his steps. And that is our story, because Ashley Max was not ever in my plan, and a house full of kids was in my plan, but not necessarily how they came to me. We, after I graduated and we got married, I kind of dabbled a little bit. Actually, it was when I was engaged, dabbled a little bit in catering. Always grew up, loving to cook, and just kind of cooked with my mom and grandmother in the kitchen and had no formal training. But my grandmother that's here with us is 90, by the way, just had her birthday. We celebrated here, actually. And she hired me to cater an event in Mountain Brook for 100 people. And I was cooking in my mom's kitchen. I was living at home at the time. And I remember telling my mom, this is horrible. No, I do not want to go into catering. This is the worst job. And so I served. I remember I was a mess. I had no makeup on because Apple wanted me to come serve. But I'd been cooking all day and night. Get there, set everything up. And anyway, everybody loved it. And her friends would call me to do some other things. And so I did take on a few other little things, but was still thinking, this is not my jam. I don't really love this. I love to eat and cook food, but I don't necessarily want to do this for a job. So then I went and got a job at Martin Advertising after I got married, and I was next to this girl in the cubicle, and she and I decided to start little side business, and we said, we're gonna cater for friends and family, but still, once again, this is just something we're gonna do till we have kids, and so very much a hobby. And anyway, my boss at the time called me in there, and she was like, y'all been gone for 2.5 hours on your lunch break. And we were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm sorry. We're like, we delivered some chicken salad downtown. And she's like, what? So then I started telling her what we were doing. And she was like, well, that's great and all, but, you need to still be at work. And so I remember going home and I told my husband, I was like, I got in trouble at work. And so I was like, we've got to decide what we're doing here. So I really was cooking so much at the time and catering so much that I really didn't have time to do both. And so my husband was like, I really think you need to go after this. Like, you're doing great at this. People love your food. So anyway, I ended up leaving that job and started cooking out of our house or continued cooking out of our house. And I remember I had this event for Lifeline Children's Services, which is actually where we adopted our child from years later. But it's for 50 people. And mind you, I'm in like an apartment-sized kitchen. And we have like 3 refrigerators in there. You can barely move. And it was just an operation that was like quickly outgrowing an apartment. And so I remember I pull out this poppy seed chicken. Y'all might have had that from Ashley Max dish. And it started spilling. And I was in tears. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I can't do this by myself. And where is this going? And I remember my husband just being like, God's going to provide if this is what we're, supposed to be doing. And next thing we know, we heard this scream downstairs. We were living in an apartment in Homewood. This scream, so we run down there, and it was this lady named Juana who's here with me today. And we opened the door, we're like, is everything okay? And she was like, there's a lizard. Somebody get the lizard out. And so my husband goes in there and helps her. And so she had gotten married to our neighbor. So we hadn't met her yet. And so we're like, oh, Reggie's wife, Juana, so nice to meet you. Glad we can help you with your lizard. And Andy was like, so are you going to get a job here? And Juana's like, yeah, I guess so. And he said, would you like to cook? And she said, yeah. And he said, you're hired. So the next morning, literally the next day, Juana comes up in her workout clothes, and I'm in my workout clothes. I'm like, okay, have you ever made a carrot cake? And she's like, no. And I was like, okay, let me show you how to make our carrot cake. And then we went through our whole kind of menu and showed her how to bake and do all these things. And she knew a lot of it from growing up too. And so I remember we had like cakes spread out all over like towels with like cooling racks, like all over my dining room floor, trying to make all this work. And so that was kind of God's first kind of like, okay, this is like, I'm going to provide for you. This is what, you're supposed to be doing. So fast forward, we ended up finding a spot in Bluff Park that was just my catering kitchen. And so we did not have a restaurant or anything else. And catered out of there for several years, and then through this time, I really just wanted kids. And my husband was like, I'll make a deal with you. Just stick with me, help me continue to build this, and then when we have kids, you can stay at home. And so there was parts of it I liked, but parts, I didn't. And so anyway, we continued to pray and kind of struggled through fertility, going back and forth to the doctor, and but Ashley Max was really growing at this time. And so looking back at our story, if we had gotten pregnant when I wanted to be, there would definitely not be an Ashley Max because we were working, 15 hours a day, and that just wouldn't have been feasible, obviously, with small kids. And so anyway, after Bluff Park, I finally was kind of on board, and we did have our first child during that time. And then it continued to grow. We had about 7 employees. So it was me and Juana and a few others. And then my husband found this place in Cabo Heights, and he said, I think maybe we're going to go ahead and expand. What do you think about this? And I was like, oh, you're killing me. Like, I've already kind of gotten on board to like cater and expand the business. And he was like, well, this side of town really is, wanting some Ashley Max. And so anyway, we had a lot of clients over there. And so we go in the store and build out the kitchen. I already has a kitchen built in it. And there's this huge like storefront. So he's like, so, we're going to, like, serve your food up here. Like, I was like, no, that's like a restaurant. I don't want to own a restaurant. And he's like, well, he's an accountant. So he's like, we're paying for all this square footage up here. We got to, like, make some money. And so I begrudgingly said, okay, fine. Like, I was like, but we're not going to live at our restaurant. Like, everyone, all these business owners, if you're in a restaurant, you just, you're stuck there. So, anyway, Ashley Max, that was the first restaurant there. And it took off to I don't know if I was excited about that or not, because I told my husband he was right. And so then that was our first, we had a cafe, that was our first cafe, and then the catering operation was going, and then Gourmet to Go is kind of our other tagline that we have, the meals to go that are up front. And so that was our first like real location. And then after that one started working, he's like, I think we should put some more in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're crazy, like slow down, like this is all we can manage, And then we ended up finding another store in Inverness, and I kind of was finally on board with it now. And early on, and back up a little bit, early on, we had made a deal kind of like, help me get this going. And then I was thinking I would back off. But once again, the Lord just had other plans, and I saw this passion that I had for food and for people that I didn't even know I had in me. And so that was just the Lord's kindness of, this is what I've created you to do. So it's certainly not something I set out for. And then with our Inverness location, we had our second child, and we started seeing this trend that every time we opened a store, we started having kids. So when it was time for our third location, I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. And we went to China and adopted our little girl, who is now 6. She was 2, and we adopted her. And we were in China for 2 weeks adopting her. We had a fire at our Cava Heights location, so like a year previously, but it was still closed. So we were trying to get that up and reopened, and then also open our River Chase Cafe that same year. So it was just a lot at one time, but it was God's sense of humor for sure that we were welcoming another child into our home. And then fast forward a little bit later, we decided to open another store in Homewood. And it was a joke at this time, okay, like, are the McMakins going to have another kid? And Andy was like, we're done, no, that's ha-ha funny, And I was even kind of like, yeah, I think we're done. And I got a text message from an employee 2.5 years ago that really changed the course of our family. And that is how we have our foster son, which I'll talk a little bit about later.
Yeah, well, that is so awesome. It's incredible to see really how the Lord was working for your good and his glory in both of your difficult seasons as you kind of walked through those in life. And then speaking kind of challenging things that we face as women, we'll transition a little bit. And it's hard to pick just one challenging thing, right? We face lots of challenges in our lives. There are so many, and we don't have time to cover them all today. But there's one in particular that I do want you to discuss, and it's the myth of the perfect work-life balance. And the myth is essentially that women can and should somehow be able to achieve this, or we're failures, and kind of that's the end there. So Ashley, if you don't mind starting, I think you have a great illustration of how work and life are not compartmentalized, and you kind of alluded to that just a few minutes ago, but tell us a little bit about that in your life.
Yeah, so the work-life balance, every time I get asked that question a lot, and I usually laugh. I'm like, is there such a thing, And so, of course, we have like practical things, especially early on when the kids were small and we were growing Ashley Max, that we would have to be like, we can't talk about this at the dinner table, and I would get stressed out if we started, talking about things. So there's definitely practical things, I do think, where you have to kind of cut work off. But with our business with Ashley Max, it is such a part of our life, and we really do feel like it is our ministry, and it's what God has called us to. Just like a missionary is called to the mission field, we feel called to run the food business. And that was not something like, 15 years ago that's like, oh, I'm going to call you to the food business. It was a gradual, this is where I'm leading you. And then in that, I think just seeing all the things the Lord does through our people. And so I have 2 of our employees here with us, and we have over 105 employees now. And so it really is our work, and our ministry is life. Our church now, our pastor always says, life is mission. And so it is a part, our Ashley Max is just a part of us, just like our kids, and it is who we are, it's what we do, and it is the people really that matter to us. And so our culture at Ashley Max, we really want to build a culture of grace and of building people up, and that you have dignity in your work. And we employ a lot of people in different stages of life and getting to see their stories. And a lot of our janitorial staff is homeless. They live at Change Lives, which is a halfway house, and just getting to know these men and having them say to me, like, you're our family. And I baked a cake for one of their 50th birthdays. He said, this is the first birthday cake anyone's ever made for me. And there's story after story about just the Lord at work, and just to get to be a part of that is so special. And the illustration, I shared this with Amy before, and she was like, I really want you to bring that book. So I brought the book, but it is a book by Alan Levi, and we sponsored a concert when he came to Oak Mountain a few years ago, and he gave me this book, and it is about this little girl, Olivia, and she draws this town out of chalk, and it's a beautiful, town with buildings and people and sunshine and trees, but the people are really, really big, and the houses are really small. And so, sorry, I always cry when I read this, but I have it sitting in my office just to remind me, because I certainly can lose focus and forget what we're doing, but I love how he says, to the Queen of Ashleytown, with thanks for your kindness and with prayers that you will color the world with the love of Jesus. Always remember the people are big and the houses are small. And so my husband and I constantly have to remind each other of we're making big decisions, which I feel like is if you own a business, that's the most stressful part to me. We daily have to make very difficult decisions, and it's weighing and it's exhausting mentally, but just that keeps our focus. It's like, what is this about? That the people are big and the houses are small, and that God has created each of us to work and to love one another and to build each other up. So that's kind of become where our life and our work and our ministry are all one.
And Jen, you've referred to this myth as chasing after a unicorn. Mm-hmm. Would you elaborate on that for us a little
Sure.
bit?
So actually, there's a few of our realtors here. Keller Williams Vestavia is just down the street, and we have 286 agents that work out of that office. And this is real estate, very similar to what you're talking about, is very pervasive as a business. You don't work 8 to 5. You are on call as a realtor all the time, is what it feels like. And the idea of balance is something that I specifically see women struggle with, because we carry so many roles in who we are. We're mothers, we're wives, we're single mothers, we are business owners. So this is a conversation that is ongoing in our office. And a few of my agents here, y'all can just tune it out, because I know you've heard this before. I'm not going to make you do it, but I want you to just close your eyes for 2 seconds. And imagine that I asked you to push your chair back and stand on one leg and balance. And I want you to think for a minute, as you're standing on one leg, what do you feel? Holler back at me. What do you feel? What? You feel unsteady. Do you feel tension? Do you feel your muscles in your thigh moving, making little adjustments constantly so that you don't fall? Are you balanced? You are not balanced. You are balancing. It is a verb. It's not a state. And I think we all are chasing this idea of a balanced life as this marker that we are to achieve. And I'm here to tell you, stop. Because you don't ever hit balanced. You are constantly in life counterbalancing, just like your leg is doing when you stand on one leg. You're making minor adjustments. And so what I share with my realtors all the time is you've got to counterbalance. And the reality is I think it starts in your mind. Number one, understanding that, first of all, we judge our insides by other people's outsides. We all look around at everyone around us and we think, Ashley Mack has got it going on. She's got 4 perfect kids and a wonderful husband and 4 restaurants, and I can guarantee you, and this is the first time we've ever met, I can guarantee you if you put her behind a closed door and said, hey, do you have some struggles? She would say, holy cow, let me tell you, this is what my mess looks like, because I've got mine too. But we are judging who we are by what we perceive, and I believe social media has created that at an even higher level. All you're seeing is the highlight reel, right, on social media. You're not seeing the fights and the spit spats. So here's my point. I think we understand, number one, that the first focus is I can't find the verse in Scripture that tells me that I need to live a balanced life. Now, the hot, righteous Proverbs 31 babe is who we all aspire to be, and she is probably the closest that I've seen. But when I look at that, I look at what she understands, and she understands first of all, what are your responsibilities? What are your God-given responsibilities? What are you ordained to do? Not what you choose to do. What are you responsible to do? And that's our priority but we can only see that priority in line with the priority, the singular priority that Christ is it's who we live to glorify, not everybody else that we're trying to be like. So let me bring it around to this point. Number one, understand in your head, if you want a balanced life, just please let go of that. Please don't, because you're just going to be striving after something. And by the way, that becomes an idol. And all of a sudden, we're chasing after a balanced life as opposed to chasing after Jesus. And number two, realize that you are going to have seasons of counterbalance. Does anyone in this room have more than one child? Raise your hand. You play whack-a-mole just like I do. Right? Do you love your children equally? And I know sometimes you can say no, but truly, we love our children the same. None of mine are here. But aren't there time? Are you ever spending your attention and love and focus equally distributed amongst your children? You're doing this. And there are times when one of your child requires more attention and focus, and then you shift to another one because they're in that season. That's what we have to do with life. There are times that my work takes more of my energy than my family does. That's just the truth. I'm responsible to the contract that I signed to do the job well and honor the Lord. There are times when work is going on the back seat because my family, my middle son, I'll give you this one example and then I'll wrap it up. My middle son, sweet Lord, it's amazing I haven't killed him. I mean, I would have sold him for a quarter 100 times. But his senior year of high school, I mean, I'll be honest with you, senior year of high school, we didn't know until 11 hours before graduation if he was going to graduate from high school. By the way, he'd already been accepted to Stanford University to play football. I didn't know if he would play. So, yeah, they do make exceptions for football players. I'm here to tell you. He really hit it out of the park on his SATs, which made me even more mad because, like, you're clearly smart. But that whole year, that whole school year, I went to my staff and I said, hey, guys, here's the deal. You're going to have to carry me because I'm going to be at home later in the mornings and I'm getting out of here earlier because I'm going to go to war with my son every single morning about getting up and going to school. And I'm just being as transparent as I possibly can. Y'all are going to have to pick up my slack. And then there were other times in that job where I was more focused there. So my point is this. Number one, don't look at anybody else and think that they have it together. Anybody in this room that has sold real estate, because there are some realtors here, know we get to go behind the curtain of a family. We get to see the real deal, how y'all fight, how you manage your money, how you make decisions. And I remember as a young agent, I would look at these families and I would be just covetous and jealous. And I'd go, oh, they're going to buy this expensive house and their house is perfectly decorated and their kids look perfect all the time. And how do they do it? They don't. They're just as messy as I am. And so that would be my encouragement. Don't chase something that isn't a reality or a possibility. Chase after Jesus. Honor the responsibilities that he's put you with and know that you're going to swing back and forth all the time.
Thank y'all so much. It's super helpful advice, and hopefully y'all have been encouraged by that myth, or busting the myth, I guess we should say. So we have one last thing as we kind of wrap up, and we want to make sure.
How are we doing on time?
We're doing good.
Okay.
So we do want to make sure that y'all get back within an hour or so of being here. And so as we wrap up, would y'all just share briefly some practical tips with these women of how you stay rested and replenished spiritually, and kind of what helps you stay focused on what really matters? Mm-hmm. Do you want to start this time?
Sure. How you stay rested and how you stay focused on what really matters. Well, I think if you get the first part of what I just said right, it helps you with the second part. And again, y'all have heard this before, my agents that are sitting here. Here's my advice on this specific question. Number one, I believe that we all have 3 resources given to us. Every single one in this room has 3 resources available. They are time, money, and energy. Would you agree with that? Who in here has a deal with God that gets them more than 24 hours in a day? Because if you do, I'd like cut me in on that, please. I could use more. We all have the same amount of time. Do we all have the same amount of money? No, it's not equally. Some have more, some have less. And then there's energy. So when I look at those 3 resources and I think, how do I rest myself and how do I replenish? I begin to prioritize those resources. Once time is spent, you can't get it back, and I understand that. But barring Jesus coming back tomorrow or tonight, or an unexpected, untimely, or unplanned death where we go home to meet the Lord, what do you have to do in this room to get a new set of 24 hours tomorrow? Nothing, right? You wake up. You open your eyes, and it's a new day. So I don't have to spend anything to get the next 24 hours. It doesn't cost me anything. Now, how I use it, judiciously or not, that's up to me to decide. But it doesn't cost me to get it. Money, I can spend it, I can lose it, I can make it, I can replace it, all of those things. But has anyone ever felt, and maybe I'm the only person in the room alone in this, has anyone ever felt like your energy was low? Right? What do you do to get your energy, to get it up? What do you have to do? You have to do a lot of things. If we were in one of my classrooms, we'd be engaging back and forth, but you have to do things. You have to rest well. You have to get good sleep. You have to eat well. You need physical affection with your family. You need hug. You need love. You need quality time with the Lord. You need quiet time. You need time to meditate on scripture and prayer. You need to exercise. The crazy thing about exercise is sometimes to feel better and have energy, you need to exercise, but the last thing you feel like doing is exercising because you don't feel good, but you have to do what you don't want to do to get where you want to go. So all of those things lead me to this point. I think energy is the most, and there's not a right or wrong here, it's my personal opinion. I think energy is the most valuable commodity that any of us have. And I think we throw it away like it's nothing. If you think back over the last 12 months of your life, was there ever a night or multiple nights that you lost sleep worrying about something? Yeah? Can you remember what those somethings were right now? Gun to your head. Maybe one or two, but if we really went back and thought of all the nights that we lost sleep, was it really important? Was it so important that you have forgotten it a year later? And I think that's where we put a lot of our worry and a lot of our energy. So what I teach my agents, what I try and do myself, is I have a metrics that I use that helps me decide if something is going to warrant my energy once I get home. Because understand the displacement factor of energy. If I am giving some energy to something, what am I also doing? I'm taking it away from something else. Guess what that something else typically is? Your family. It's your children. You know, you come home, you kick the dog, you yell at the kids, and all they did was show up and have a Tupperware bowl on their head, you know. Nothing to do with the fact that I just, had a rough day. What I'm giving, I am taking away from something else. And so I ask myself 3 questions, and I wish I could claim originality for this. This was what I have a business coach that coaches me every week, and this is what he taught me. Did I cause it? Can I control it? Can I cure it? If the answer to those 3 things is no, it's done. Drop it at the floor, let it go. Don't bring it in the house from the garage. Don't bring it into your kids' worlds. Don't take it to bed. It's done. Now, sometimes I did cause it. I need to go fix it. Sometimes I can control it. Let me get to work. Sometimes I can cure it. I will bet you that 85% of what you lose sleep over, you shouldn't, because I've done it. So understanding that, I began to think about, well, how can I make that a priority in my life every day? How can I really keep that on the front burner of my mind? So I'm going to give you 2 illustrations, and then you'll be done listening to me ramble on for the day. I had an agent of mine that used to be intelligence in the military, Ramstein Air Force Base, and super high-level classification. So the things that he's a high I, extrovert, verbal guy, people person, effusive. He would drive home, and the hardest part about his job was that he couldn't talk about it, because he talked about everything. And so as he would cross the gates and exit the base to go home, he would take his Velcro patch off, that was his name, and he would put it on the seat. And that was his visual tie down that Ed Walden military is staying there, and I'm coming home to be Ed Walden husband. And I can't talk about that or I lose my job, and I need to be present where I am. And then when he would come back on base in the morning, pick it up and put it off. And I began to think that cause, control, cure, as I would drive home every day, and I still do this to this day, when I'm driving home and I'm thinking of all the things that I'm stressing about and worrying about, and oh my gosh, it's such a big deal. Did I cause it? Can I control it? Can I cure it? And if not, the minute my car hits the driveway, it's got to stay there. And that's just a mental discipline. Now, sometimes I take the long way home. Not gonna lie. Sometimes I may loop Mount Laurel a few times before I pull into my driveway. But I've got to make that mental discipline commitment in order to be restored. And then the final illustration I'll give you is this. Most of us women love the Tiffany & Company Robin's Egg Blue boxes that come. I had a bracelet that I wanted for years, and I just wouldn't spend the money on myself to get it. And I had taken my daughter and her best friend to Hawaii for spring break. They were in high school, seniors in high school. And they were out running around. We were in Waikiki, and I was killing some time walking through the shops, and they had a Tiffany and Company. And I went in and I, salivated over this bracelet that I wasn't going to buy for myself. And I even tried it on, and I took it off, and I exited the store. Incidentally, I had been having this conversation about energy with a friend of mine the night before. I walked out of the store, and there's a woman walking down the sidewalk, and a guy comes flying down, running, snatches her purse, takes off running. And so what did the woman do? She took off after him. Good for her. And I began to think, and this is just where my weird brain goes, and I don't understand it, but it's how I think. I thought, what if I had walked out of here with this bracelet that I have wanted for 5 years in my hand, in a bag, and he had snatched it? What would I do? Well, I'm here to tell you, I would have walked him down and punched him, and I would have gotten that back. I would have fought to have that thing of value back in my hand. My energy level, my ability to be a servant for the Lord, my ability to bring my best to the job to reflect and glorify Him, my ability to be a mother and a wife, all of those things, I do better when I have more energy. And yet I am just throwing things away like that, and I don't care. But I would fight for a possession. And so I always remember, and my kids and I had a buzzword years ago. When I would start to bring work home that didn't have an appropriate place at home, they would say, bracelet. And sometimes I say, sorry, this is, and sometimes there are things that require that energy. That's my point. You have to learn when and where and how. So just my advice is, my advice is not how do I stay rested. My advice is how do I avoid getting more tired than I need to be on the front end. My expenditure of my mental time, energy, stability.
Well, that was such a good answer. I'm going to take the totally vain route. So last week, you got us all professionally and spiritually replenished. So last Sunday, I spoke at Southern Lady Celebration at the Winfrey Hotel, like 200 old ladies that like to cook. And it was really fun. And that morning, I was sitting there with my husband, like going over what I was going to say. And I was like, oh, like my nails, like they haven't been done in like years. Not really years, but a long time. And so I'd like been picking like the gel off, so they were like half on, half off. And I was doing a cooking demo that morning. I was like, I really should get these off. So I put, wrapped them in the foil, whatever. And then I was like, this is so much trouble. And I didn't have time. So I took them off. The nails were like disgusting, And so I did this little demo and I was like, no one's going to notice, it'll be fine. And then I looked up at the screen. They have like me cooking on the screen. And I was like, gonna make a joke about it, but I didn't realize till afterwards that it was on the screen, So I was like thinking no one saw. I was like, oh. So anyway, so then last night I went and got my nails done, and so this morning I told my husband, I was like, oh, it just feels so good to have my nails done, and he was like, y'all are so weird, and so just taking time for yourself, it really, I was like, I feel so clean and I don't know, and so just taking time for yourself, and I think that illustration too, I kept putting it off. I'm like, I spoke at something and I had this big event last week. I should have gotten them done, but it was like, oh, I don't, need to do that or whatever. I don't have time for that. And so I literally last night at 6:30 when my husband got home from work, went to get my nails done. But just taking time for yourself and taking care of yourself, like you said, with exercise. And then obviously spiritually taking care of yourself. And for me, beyond obviously time with the Lord, time in the Word, church, but your community is so important. I have two of my best friends with me. But just your community that is who fuels, your life besides obviously the Word of God, and through that in the Word of God, with your friends and family, and just living life together and being able to encourage one another, whether it's with your kids or with your work. I mean, it takes a village, and my sweet mom and everybody that takes care of our kids. It takes so many people, and I think investing in your community, investing in people are big, the houses are small, just remembering that is, really gives me my energy.
Yeah, well, thank y'all so much. Thank y'all for sharing with us today. I hope that y'all have been as encouraged as I have just through hearing that, we all walk through challenging situations, but the Lord is faithful, and practical tips, too, of how to stay balanced, or a little more balanced. Balancing. How to maintain, the act of balancing. And so at this time, I would like Amy Patillo, who is the director of the WBL, to come and close out our time together. Y'all stay right here.
Thank you. Would y'all join me in thanking them this morning? Thank y'all so much. Thank you.